In attendance, we have the board, our solicitor, Mike Hoffman, the mayor, and general manager and assistant general manager. So any revisions or deletions to the agenda?
Nope.
Okay. Consent agenda? A motion to approve?
I'll move we accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay. Inframark report. We have Mike Wovenmuth and Richard Plack here with us.
Good evening. Okay, Garden Headworks, still utilizing the dewatering roll-off container, while the life factor's offline. Filters, we finished train 3, during the end of June. Planning to start we finished train 2 the end of June. We were planning to start train 3 this week, but that got delayed to next week or the week after due to the contractor scheduling. We didn't have Suez reports included in this month's report because there's a communication issue with the controller that sends Suez the information. So Suez has sent a control box, a control panel to be installed by Josh, I believe, Josh Crichton, and he has not received it yet.
Does that impact any of the monitoring of that is going on by them?
By them, yes, they can't see it.
You can't see it right now. How long has that been going on?
For about a little over a month.
Oh,
A month.
Correct.
When was it first discovered? I mean, just,
In the reports, they sent us a email stating that we were doing troubleshooting diagnostics with the aid of Mr. Gritton. And discovered that it was their equipment that has failed programming issues, not allowing them to communicate to them.
So Erin Hirochin, she is the one that manages all the insight.
right?
So she had reached out when she noticed the error in reporting from Suez's side. So then when she reached out, Josh got engaged. These gentlemen basically worked together with and I don't know who the gentleman was at Suez.
Brendan,
Yeah.
one of the techs. The gentleman from Suez that we're working with, his name is Brendan. He went ahead and notified that the box wasn't working after several days of troubleshooting. And at that time, they informed us that they needed to go ahead and send a replacement box. We have not received that yet. And I did reach out to them recently to see if they could provide tracking information and an update on that progress. So I haven't received a response yet.
Yes.
Sorry.
I'm moving on to pump stations. So the parts to the rotating assemblies for pump station 3 pumps have been received. They're not going to be installed until a project to replace the isolation valves occurs, which is to occur in late August or early September. There's a construction meeting with Sprigg, the contractor that's going to do the work, on August 9th. Do you have anything to add to that, Richard?
No, it's just a pre-construction meeting just to verify that all of the flagging needs are met and making sure to finalize all the due diligence for that project.
We already met with the property owner to go over it, just to go to the location where we're gonna be placing the valving. We had a homeowner come out. We spoke to him just to kind of give him a heads up. I did let the property owner know, we would let him know when we were going to be doing the work, just so that he's aware. Because it's crushed shell and we'll be working there's going to be a manhole that's set with the bypass valve that's going to be in the shelled area. And I mentioned to him, whoever he used for a contractor for the shells, if we need to replace any, we'll get some.
So, PMs have occurred to the blowers, oil changes and belt replacements. Guy's been working on that over the month of June. You have anything to add, Richard?
We've been, we also addressed an issue with one of the chemical feed pumps lately in regards to the membrane cleaning. Just addressing a leak that had occurred, and we were able to restore that. And we are continuing to move through the other pumps and equipment through headworks, oil changes and belts, just typical annual PMs, just to ensure good working operation.
We did also get a quote for the, to purchase outright the emergency generator that's at 4 now. It's a Caterpillar Albin, generator 60 kW. So it would be, I'm assuming it's like direct replacement for what was there, being it was a 60 kW, because I think the original was a 60 kW. We did have, through the Headworks project, we also included pump stations with that. We were going to replace the generator, but with a bigger size. It was going to be 100 kW. That would be a little bit of added redundancy due to the size. But the way that it's currently set up is that I believe the pumps are 480, but all the controls within the pump station are 240. And that's why we have the step up transformers, 240 going in, step up for the pumps, and then 240 for all the controls on the first floor. So this is, and just to give you a little bit of context, so the temp generator, I think it was the United rental one is what I saw was about $1,700 a month. So this is about $55,000 to purchase the temp generator instead of renting it. And then obviously that would be coming back to us for us to use it at other pump stations when needed.
So, I mean, the payback period is about half a year under that scenario. And the only question was, should we buy that one or get 100 kW one?
Do you know if there's availability on a bigger one?
I don't at this time, but I can inquire about that.
And just to close, the one that they're offering to sell us is the one we have.
Correct. It's
Yeah,
the one that's in
okay.
place.
I
So what
think we probably would want look at what the option is, because getting the 100 kW would ensure that we could power both pumps at pump station 4.
I'll put it on the agenda for the next board meeting as an item, and I'll work with Rich and we'll put something together so that we have a couple options.
Likewise, if there's other opportunities like that as well out there.
So I think at the next meeting, so just Scott Getchell from GMD, Austin and I did our quarterly walk down to the plant and with Richard. And, Scott has issued the draft report, we'll get that out. And, but the one thing I would encourage is that some of the maintenance that needs to get done to prepare for the winter season, like replacement of the heaters, the measuring of the cabling and stuff like that, that we keep on top of, because I don't want to see us get into problems down the line.
Okay, we will.
Any other questions for him?
No.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
So next, the president's report, I'll keep it high level. Yesterday morning, I was at Sussex County for the county council meeting. The Mitchell Farm was approved with conditions. I sent all the conditions out to everyone. I think Mr. Medlar,
See you in the back.
wherever the ghost of Mr. Medlar is, did a great job at looking after the interest of the wells and putting conditions in. So that project was the zoning changes, the 2 zoning changes were approved. and the project with conditional use was approved. So what we still have outstanding out there is the village and the cottages. And both of those are in county councils or planning and zoning's hands, but there's no scheduled date for them. And they both been through plus. So we still have more projects out there. DRBA, I've been asked to sit in a meeting with DRBA relative to their plans for the ferry terminal from an electric capacity perspective. Well, number 3, Austin, you want to cover that one?
Yeah, so well 3 and well 5 were both rebuilt by AC Schultes, and when they do it, they clean the well shaft, the screens, etc. And then we rebuilt the pump. When the pump came back on, there was a little bit of sand and grit, so they ended up seized up the pump. So they pulled the pump, did another camera. So all 5 wells were put in the between 1977 and 1984. There's some questions on whether or not there's some pitting that may have led to some pinhole leaks in well 3. So we're in the process of working with AC Schultes to put a couple proposals together, which we'll be coming back to you in August for. They range from swabbing it and doing a more thorough test to actually relining it. Relining it is a least expensive option, and they have the ability of doing it with just a standard steel casing or doing it with a stainless steel casing. One of the unique parts of that well particularly is that there's a screen in the early stage. I'm going to say it's about 75 feet on, and then there's a spool piece and then an additional screen. If we were to either reline it or rebuild it, which is another option, is they would eliminate that spool piece and it would be a solid screen from about the 75 at 100 feet all the way down. So we're getting options for a stainless steel casing, a regular steel casing, and then also redeveloping that well altogether, re-drilling it. And that would be either a 12-inch well, which is existing, it would match existing, or option 2, which would be a 16-inch well, which would match well 4 and well 5. Which have about a 25 to 30% additional capacity over the other wells. So
Just the one thing, the swabbing that they want to do will help determine where the leak or what the source is, because they're not sure whether it's the casing or the backfill gravel around the screen area. So it's only, he said, what, $4,000 to do that? And it would give us an assessment of what the other wells, which, as Austin mentioned, are equal vintage. So it's, if we were just going to recase it, you would say, why bother? But, to get some sort of indication of what the life of the other wells are, the $4,000, $5,000 is probably worthwhile. I think that's it.
Hans came back in.
You missed out. I thanked you for your efforts on the Mitchell Farm. Yep. All right, moving on, general manager's report.
So a little bit of an update. So Kim and staff have been working on the audit. We'll be looking to bring the audit back to the board at the August board meeting. So that's already on the agenda. We did some finalized work. We had to provide some statements similar to what Darren did last year. So we have all of that sent off. So we'll be coming back in August. Mumford and Miller, they mill and paved everything on Monday. I know it's been a long process for that project. It's a very, very tricky intersection. And that will ultimately, that one lane, even though we did pave it, will be cut open again when we extend the water line as part of the Donovan Smith project. But I think as it stands right now, that road with the milling and paving that they did looks absolutely terrific, 10 times better than what it did before. So that kind of closes out that project. They're going to be doing final striping on Friday. So after that, there's some concrete collars that have to get done, some punch lists, some seating, some grading. And then that moves us on to the Politown Road project. Due to the weather this morning, George and Lynch didn't come back and do paving of the other lane. They're scheduled to do that tomorrow. So they'll be back tomorrow to do the final paving. I don't know if they will get to the striping. I probably won't. So they may come back at a later date, maybe Monday, to do the striping, which they'll just go down and do it, and they'll do the intersections as well. We had Robin and I assisted the water and wastewater crew on a sinkhole in Kings Highway the week of July 4th, which Tom graciously blessed us with his presence after his bike ride. We also had a service leak on 2nd Street, which our water and wastewater department fixed. Just going through some major kind of meetings and events. We did have a customer inquiry that came through the Smart Hub portal. I just wanted to read it to you guys. It was from Clarice Lucas. I provided it to you in email, but I figured I'd read it to you at a board meeting. He had mentioned, "Hello, I'm interested in knowing if the BPW is working towards or considering noise suppression of the sewage treatment plant. The frequency and noise of the aeration pumps is most noticeably at night as it penetrates my house, my closed house. I'm nearly a half a mile away on Madison Avenue. If not on the BPW's agenda, I would like to make a proposal that action be taken to alleviate this noise from our community." Just for context, Madison is fairly in town. I mean, it's right around BB. So just as context, just want to let you guys know that did come in.
Have we ever had any other complaints from that area?
No, but I think you would want to ask Earl, because Earl lives directly across.
I
from
know.
I live across from it. I hear the noise. I think people just kind of dialed in, to be honest with you. Would they prefer it not to be there? Yes. But I hear no complaints walking up and down the street.
Yeah, and from Washington, which is, 1 block over from Madison, I have never heard the plant from the backyard or the front yard. So,
When
but it's also, sound travels in strange
Yeah,
ways. So
yeah. I mean,
I'm not discounting what he's saying, but
I've walked that area many times and I've never noticed it. So
And it couldn't be the electrical lines or anything back in that area, or
no,
it's close.
back when we had the deaerating tank running at the wastewater treatment plant, I heard that thing all the time. But since that's been decommissioned, other than the trucks in the yard, nothing. But
So,
once again, sound travels in strange ways, so
With the wind
I'm
and
not
everything.
discounting what he's saying.
also, Tom, myself, Anne Marie, and Andrew, we had our monthly meeting. We discussed the Slay Avenue master plan. As it stands right now, I know there's been a lot of discussion on different options. Obviously, space is limited. I mean, we utilize every opportunity we can with the space that we have. And with a growing town and construction, it becomes a little bit hard to utilize what we have. So I don't know, do you have anything else you want to add, Tom? Okay. We also had an outage on 716. It was out on the end of Politown Road as you go around the bend at the Lewes Dairy. That outage, our guys restored power and I think in a pretty timely manner for the group that they have. But it was caused by, we built osprey nests where they tend to kind of co-locate on poles. So we actually built an osprey nest quite a distance away, but they decided that day they didn't want to use the nest. And so they dropped some sticks on the 3-phase power lines and burned up 2 of the 3 phases. So our guys came in, they replaced all 3 phases just for a precautionary, and they had power back on within a couple hours.
No ospreys were damaged in the
So
process.
no ospreys were damaged in the process.
However, we have placed a Homeland Security alert. They are terrorists.
So I did want to turn it over to both Josh for an IT update, and Kim, did you want to provide a budget update as well?
I will start with the security report. Little good news, bad news. The short version is that we've seen a lot less attempts, significant decrease in attempts. However, the attempts that have been are more strategic. We have seen an uptick in validated malware attempts, and we are still mitigating those at this time. And we are going to, we're working at moving forward with awareness training, and we'll be deploying that on incremental basis, more frequent incremental basis than we already are. So that way we can help educate not just our staff, but anyone that wants to be part of it.
How many hits do we get, like daily, weekly, or monthly, or whatever?
So we are down into the low 100s as far as attempts
Is that a month or,
a month.
okay,
Yeah, typically we're in the 300s, so we have seen a significant drop. However, our validated attempts have gone up. Last month, they were validated malware was 13. This month, we validated 16. So that's in addition to the previous 13. It's not on, it's on top of. So,
Are
and
we comparable to the city? I'm just curious. And have you had a chance to help or work with the city in any way?
we did have a meeting, June, I think it was, Anne Marie, the end of June. And that was pretty much an introductory kickoff meeting. As far as their statistics on what their reports look like, I don't know. I can't speak for them. But I'd be happy to work with them, and we can certainly compare notes.
Shared practices kind of thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's pretty much my security report. Working over to my projects, we are move forward with our .gov. We've reapplied because we had a change in command. I had to start the whole process again, in addition to a few other technical timeline issues that lined up at the perfect time, and we couldn't resolve it before we had the change of hands. We're hoping to have that hopefully by the next meeting. We should have at least the bulk of the checklist checked off. But my goal is to have completed that and obtained the .gov. Whether we'll move forward with the .gov domain or the email addresses and whatnot, that's to be determined at this point. But obtaining that TLD at the top level domain at this time is very difficult process. So we're going to get that taken care of. The wastewater treatment plant, the electric issues are still there. I'm working with Richard. We were concerned about, you had mentioned previously about the megging the lines. I went ahead and I sent over my preliminary report to Austin and said that I felt as though I didn't have enough data collected to make a sufficient recommendation. So I left the recommendation to you. And at this time, Austin felt it would be in the best interest to move forward with megging that. And I think you said have a baseline.
Yeah, it basically creates a benchmark because it hasn't been done. One of the things is that we have sensitivity levels that are set within the PLCs themselves. And those sensitivity levels are very, very tight. So the parameters are very, very tight. So any fluctuation of any sort throws off the potential of a problem. So since the parameters were changed to be a little bit more flexible, we haven't had nearly as many, or I don't think we've had any call outs. So I still feel as if it makes sense to measure it, get a benchmark, see what everything looks like, just because of what we've had in the past, specifically with the headwork supply. So this will give us what our benchmark would be.
But were you referring to low voltage control cabling?
So it's a transition. No, it's not low voltage. Our UPSs will they monitor the input and any minute fluctuation in that voltage for any period of time. We can dial it in very, very tight. By default, it's pretty tight. We went through the problem UPSs and we dialed those back a step. it's to be a little bit more tolerant of those variations. And at this time, we haven't received any call outs. I'm still going to continue to monitor it. It's it takes just a few minutes of my time to really monitor it. And I just check it once a week, really, and just to see if there's any kind of call outs.
So just for everyone's information, measuring is using high voltages, extremely high voltages, but with very, very small current readings to determine the insulation values of your cables. So as cables age or rodents gnaw at them, that degrades. And
Salt water.
that's what we see, the cable failures that were underground, they were power cables. That was all medium voltage stuff. That was 240 or 480. I don't remember what they were. So in addition, what we asked Richard was when to get an option on the measuring, because besides cabling, you could also measure breakers and MCCs, which will tell you the condition of the insulation values inside them. And that is kind of industry practice. And given the fact that the MCCs out at that plant are all, from the renovation, I would feel much more comfortable coming from an electrical background, knowing the condition of the motor control centers.
You concur? You concur? Okay.
Yeah, so they've gone out and they've got a proposal for measuring cables, and they're gonna go get an option for measuring the MCCs.
Correct.
So these are just condition assessments and give us a better idea of what the status is out there.
He makes this part easy. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No.
Okay, sorry. I didn't want to speak for Rich. Kind of the last project item is kind of a combined of two, a detailed asset assessment of our digital and all of our physical assets within the IT division, and a service desk ticketing implementation. We have been working on that for, well, I started it before Mike showed up, and then, which I'll get to in a second. And then, so the asset ticket, or the asset assessment is just going to give us a very, very granular perspective of each one of our IT assets. And we'll be able to provide not just what it is, but also cost. And so that we will be able to much more accurately forecast for budgeting, which I think Kim might appreciate. And then the service desk ticketing implementation. So that's also how we're tracking the IT department's movements, all of the trouble calls, et cetera. We want to be able to show you a very detailed manner of what we're doing and how we're doing it and how efficient we are at doing it. And lastly, the last thing I have would be the introduction of Mike Posey. He's accepted the position as we had our last meeting. Mike was previously self-employed, and I think that would be really, really in the autumn. What was it?
It was audio visual
Audio.
control.
Yeah, controls. That's what I was looking for. So I think he's going to bring a great asset to our organization, and I think that he has a very sufficient background. In addition to that, his prior work experience, I think he'll be a really good asset.
Award.
Well,
Yeah,
good.
well,
Yeah.
like it.
And that's all I have, unless anyone has anything else.
Winning lottery number.
Working on that.
Okay.
Right, Kim?
You're right. Right. All right, for financials, you have your monthly, your year-to-date, and your quarter one. Your quarter one, and your year-to-date are the same numbers. They're just presented a little different. Based on the first quarter, I made some budget amendments. according to our policies, we do this administratively and then we present it to you. Of the changes that we did. And for electric revenue, industrial, municipal and Board of Public Works are under budget. So they have all been adjusted and I did not adjust quite the same percentage that they're off with our PCA increasing with our power supply costs going up. So we expect that customers will get smaller and smaller credits on their bills. For electric expenses, depreciation amortization is actually for electric, water and wastewater. Overall, it is a reduction, but I kind of split it differently between the utilities. The in lieu of franchise fee, of course, changed with revenue changing. Water revenue, commercial and municipal are underperforming, so those were adjusted according to those percentages. Industrial and other are overperforming. I took half of the overperformance of industrial just in case this is some kind of fluke, but and other, I took the year to date and then the remaining balance of 92%. For the expenses, professional and contractual, we're quite a bit over, and that has to do with the study for the wellhead protection. So I did the current year to date plus the remaining budget. So I didn't adjust the remaining budget at all because I don't think we'll get any more bills for the wellhead protection. And if we do, I'm not sure exactly when we're going to get it because we're not going to get the results for another 1.5 to 2 years. So I didn't want to assume that it would be this fiscal year. And in lieu of franchise fee, of course, is changed again. Wastewater revenue, the only thing that changed is residential has been running consistently at 3% under budget. So that's what I went ahead and changed it to. The expenses, repairs and maintenance have been running high for chemicals have been running a little high. And what else is on there? And Clean Delaware is up. The professional and contractual were actually running under budget, but I went and added the $125,000 for the PhD study. The depreciation amortization was changed and in lieu of franchise fee changes. And our grants, we have been getting quite a bit for wastewater. I still think my estimate is low, but I did what we've done year to date in first quarter ×2, which it probably should be ×4, but I'm gonna work with GMB a little bit on that to get more accurate numbers. And stormwater revenue for other, we had that one big bill for Lewes Waterfront Preserve that kind of threw everything off. So I did the year to date and then 50% of remaining budget, which is only like $100 a month of a difference. Overall, our budget has been pretty spot on, but I'm not eager to claim these wins right now on the expenses with inflation rates coming out. So I kept those as they are. And wages and benefits also, we're seeing a pretty good under budget right now, but with electric employee supposed to be coming on this year, we kept it the same.
Is there any update from DMAC on the PCA relative to NRG?
You really won't see that because we tapped into the rate stabilization reserve. So I believe, Kim, tell me if I'm wrong, we were looking at October timeframe is when that we basically front loaded it for 3 months to see what the impact was going to be. For the general public, the NRG plant is a coal fire plant down in off the backside of Indian River in Millsboro. What recently has taken place is there's been a push, obviously, to renewable energy. So the coal plant was asked to decommission. And so in this case, what is the term that they're utilizing for it. It's a,
Well, it's a reserve, but it's not a spinning reserve. It's coal reserve.
yeah,
So the plant will be there, kept in physical shape to run. But if called upon, it will take 24 to 48 hours to start up. So, and they're asking for a very, very substantial charge, payment by PGM to pay for that. It was $80 million a year.
yeah, it's over 5 years. So it's
So,
about 400 million.
um, and as Austin said, right now, DMAC is using the reserves to offset that. But the rate impact will be very drastic. It's not just us, it's everyone in the area.
In this area. All providers.
So, it is being contested and I didn't know if there was anything new on the,
Is there any term to that when it's going to end or anything? Is it going to be continuous?
5 years.
5 years?
Well, they say
No.
5 years, but
they have 5 power projects, line projects to go in. And they said in 3 to 5 years when those are complete. I have never seen a transmission line go in 3 to 5 years because the contesting of the right of ways will drag this through the courts. So the answer is no. And it's not only the $80 million, it's worse than that because it allows them to charge for other expenses, which are undefined from the what I've seen and could add up to a considerable amount of money. So
Kim, do you have any opinion? We're going through a really unusual, hopefully unusual going forward too, hot period. This heat wave we've had has continued for a long time. Of course, that's when we use the most power and
our
water
electric bill
and water.
next month.
Yeah. I mean, we should have pretty good next quarter, as much as
So
I hate
it's-
having the weather.
Yeah, second quarter is always our strongest quarter. But this heat wave has been about a week, so it'll probably be 2 meetings from now that you'll see it.
I'm curious, and I know you don't have it yet, but maybe the next time, when we do have it, what was the projections on Pilot Town Road and kind of what are our actuals?
Okay,
I'm just curious to kind of see that pre and post inflation aspect to see how it really impacted us.
Okay.
Thank you.
anything else? All right,
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
thanks. All right, I think we're moving on to the new business. Item 8, flow agreement with Sussex County.
You mean 10?
Oh, I'm working from the old agenda. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
I have the old agenda too.
Do you? That's fine.
Okay.
So, okay, let me get it up. So all this is, and the county engineer Hans Mendler is here is to help with this because it's going to end up going back to county council as well. So there's a development that is off of Gills Neck Road called Henlopen Bluff, and it's going through the preliminary stages of the planning commission and going to go before council and et cetera. With that, the only infrastructure that exists from a sewer standpoint out that way is the force main that comes from the county pump station all the way down to the handshake point where it dumps into our gravity line. And so from a standpoint of what makes the most sense is that Henlopen Bluff actually approached the county and looked at from an engineering perspective if they could gravity feed into the existing sanitary sewer that exists in Henlopen Bluff or in Schofield, which everything checks out. So what this is an amendment to the agreement. It changes up one section, which talks about the rate, and we literally changed the word to the rate. And then we also added Henlopen Bluff as well as the administrative change, taking this amendment and making it the third amendment. And so Hans is here to answer any questions. It's a pretty light revision. And that's pretty much it. We adjusted the rate per the CPI, which we do at the beginning of each year in January. But other than that, it's really one addition, which is to include Henlopen Bluff. And anytime in the future, those areas that are kind of, and we've talked about it, like Ritter Lane, which is beyond Covey Creek, we would come back and amend this agreement once again to include those because the county's infrastructure butts right up against where these people would be served. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, board members. One addition and what, and Mike probably knows that, how we bill for that, an existing subdivision or proposed subdivision is already covered in the agreement. So in this case, the lift is much lighter because we've been through this twice. The first time was the in-town portion of Schofield. And the second one was the addition on Old Orchard Road. And the third one now is the new addition on Gilsneck Road. But the billing side never changed because the billing side runs off EDUs and we're just adding more EDUs. So that's why this one's much easier. The first one was the most difficult change.
Mike's taking a look at it and
I just think this is a good example how two entities can work together and use common sense to resolve a problem and or could a potential problem.
Well, the most cost-effective solution for
Yeah.
all parties.
All parties, yeah, but
Freddie, we have another pump station to your system.
I can remember times when that wouldn't have happened. So thank you very much.
And so from a process standpoint, we would approve it here. Hans would then take it back to county council. They would approve it. All parties sign and it just gets filed away as the next amendment.
So a motion to approve the amendment.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
Thanks, Hans.
You get it done.
Thanks again.
Thank you, Hans.
Yeah.
All right, item 11. Old Town at White's Pond. So Mike had sent us a markup and so. Mike, you want to start things off?
Sure, this is the development agreement for Old Town at White's Pond. What we've done in the past, would say a few years ago, we went and really redid our form development agreement. That became the basis for all future development agreements. Since even that form was adopted, the board has tweaked some policies, modified some of its policies that has now been codified in the written document or memorialized in the written document. So we have updated our form to incorporate those additional policies. I had circulated a red line version which shows the changes to the form. So the form agreement that was drafted and serves as the basis, the changes that have been made. Many of those substantive changes include revisions to our policies that affect that. There are two developer requested substantive revisions that I wanted to highlight for the board. And then I'm obviously happy to answer any questions. The first developer requested revision concerns section 2.2. And what section 2.2 involves is the amount of time. So this agreement needs to be signed and finalized, BPW improvement plans approved before construction begins on the BPW improvements. What section 2.2 says is that after a year, if the BPW improvements haven't been completed, the BPW has the right to require a re-review, basically, and an update to those plans. The developer has requested that instead of 1 year, that period be 2 years. And the basis for that is in the current supply chain climate, current construction climate, expecting to have the BPW improvements completed in a year timeframe is just not reasonable. What they're seeing is 2 years being that construction cycle. I can tell from my other hat that I wear, that is accurate. That's an accurate statement in terms of it is taking a lot longer. to complete these improvements. So that's the first substantive ask. The second substantive ask concerns section 6.2. Section 6.2 it concerns the period, the trigger point from which the board would pull on a bond. So the agreement requires that the developer post a bond in the amount of 150% of the cost of the improvements. And 6.2 addresses when the board can pull on that bond. The form just simply says when the BPW or city or whoever applicable has reason to believe that the developer won't complete the improvements, then you can pull in the bond. The developer has asked that we include a time period. In other words, if work has stopped for a period of time and you have reason to believe, that affects both the city and the board. So I've asked for feedback from Anne Marie and Glenn. The consensus was developer requested 12 months. We believe 6 months is reasonable. And so we have drafted this to be 6 months. So if a period of 6 months passes where there's no work on site and the city or BPW or both have reason to believe that the developer won't complete their obligation, that's the trigger to pull the bond. Those were the two substantive areas. Other than that, there were some cleanup things. Again, the red line shows that pretty clearly. But I'd be happy to answer any questions. And we also have Nick Hammonds on the line if you had questions directly for the developer.
Mike, did you say that Glenn's already given his comments back to you on this?
Mayor, that's a good point. So that was only on that one section. So the structure of the agreement is that there are sections that pertain to BPW improvements,
Yeah.
there's sections pertaining to city improvements, and then there's both. I've received the comment from Glenn on that piece, which pertains to both. I have not gotten Glenn's comments on the city piece, but that's okay because the city piece isn't in front of the board. And so what I would recommend, if the board wants to move forward, that the board would approve the developer's agreement and authorize staff to work with the developer to finalize the blanks with the condition that the agreement also be approved by mayor and city council. And mayor, that then opens the door for you all to finish that review.
I noticed it had Tim and I's spot for signature, so I want to make sure that our lawyer takes a look at that too. So.
Mike,
Yes.
on 6.2,
Yes,
6 weeks is consecutive or aggregate?
it's 6 months and it would be a consecutive. So if a period of time, in other words, and so if work has stopped and nobody's doing anything on site for a period of 6 months,
Right.
that becomes a clue that something's not happening. And so if that happens, then you can ask the question, do you have reason to believe that they're
How
not?
about 4 2-week stoppages interspersed in the time period?
The only thing I would caution on is so keep in mind the intent here is kind of that trying to pick the correct word, but that heavy-handed remedy of pulling the bond and the BPW stepping in and doing the work. If 2 weeks if 2 weeks stoppage happens because of supply chain or whatever event, you don't necessarily want that to be your trigger event. The question is have they stopped work? And do you have reason to believe that you need to step in to complete the work? And that's why it's the 6 months.
Okay, yeah. Well, can you make a motion? I could make a motion that say we,
So let's finish the questions.
oh, okay.
So the other one was the first one.
The 2.2.
Yeah.
And we can tackle this any number of ways. If you just want to have a conversation on each, and then we can go from there. 2.2, going back, that's the 2-year period instead of the 1 year. Before triggering re-reviews.
If we had new ordinances from the city or new things that we had in our plans as well, it would still go back to the original. It wouldn't be anything updated within those 2 years.
It's a great question, Earl. And I'll simply say I can get into the weeds in executive session if you want. But I would simply say that what this says is that after that 1 year period or 2 year period, the board has the ability to go back and re-review the plans. Your question is a good one, and I'll just
So
say it's not, I'll just leave it.
Let
my,
that simmer.
my question is that the 2.2 already says they can come back and ask for an extension from the general manager. And do we want to set precedent of going to 2 years? Fully acknowledging that we're in a strange supply chain now, but a lot can change in the next 2 years. And do we still want to keep the power of, and we wouldn't unreasonably, deny if they don't get transformers or whatever, but it at least gives a little more control on our side.
I think ours is a year, and then if they don't do something at 6 months, then they get another 6 months. So you in essence can get 2 years, but you get 1, 6, then 6. That's how ours reads. Yeah.
And to that point, I mean, there is extension of time may be granted if prior to the end of the period, they apply and provide good cause. So you do have the ability to extend that period. That is true. I think the question becomes, what's the expectation? And I think I know from conversations with the developer, the basis they were asking for that change on is if they have material ordered, if they are taking steps saying, here's the plans, we're getting everything in the queue, and that expiration period, you're really kind of creating uncertainty and jamming them up in that way. If we know today that the supply chain and construction timing of 1 year is really, really tight, their question is can you provide some certainty to them at this before they get started? That's the basis of the ask, but it is the will of the board.
Well, the question I had was that, in 2023 or 2024, when life gets back to normal, does this set any type of precedence, or 2025? I'm not, from a precedence perspective, would other developers be down the line looking for the same thing? That's really my main concern.
And my recommendation, I'm not recommending that you change the form. I'm recommending that you, in this agreement that's before you here today.
But you're saying that you think at the moment this is reasonable?
I do.
And this is an agreement now, but if in 2025, if everything's back, we can change it.
That's correct. And you may have situations in the future where it's this massive project where, again, a similar, whether it's supply chain doesn't come into play, but a similar consideration makes sense. I mean, each of these are the reason you're reviewing them on their own merits is because circumstances like this arise. I will say, if the board's position is, this is the form and we, no changes, makes it really easy on us. But I will say that the reason you approve these is to consider these types of questions.
But the language does allow an application for good cause to extend.
It does. That's correct.
Have you had any of those, Austin, recently?
Supply chain, knock on wood, on transformers is not terrible, but you got to pay to play. If that's the term you want to use. I mean, we've gotten quotes, they're astronomical. It's still 36 weeks out, one hurricane. That's what I will tell you.
Yeah.
If we run into, like, for example, and Nick's on here, if he orders transformers today and you get a category 3 or a category 5, completely changes the game. You may be 100, 150 weeks. And just to add context, DEC has stopped all new installations for developments. That's just adding context to the current situation that we deal with.
Yeah, and it's not just hurricanes. I mean, it's like last year's
National
tornadoes to the Midwest, the forest wildfires. So I just leave it up to the board there. Any other questions?
What about the next one, the 6.2?
Questions about that, or
I don't know. I was just wondering if all the questions for all these things.
So what I would recommend is what is in front of you is what staff has prepared and what staff is presenting and recommending to the board. You as the board can amend that. And so if you disagree with the recommendation on 2.2, if you disagree with the recommendation on 6.2 or both, you can say motion to approve with the amendment that 2.2 be 1 year instead of 2 years. We can handle it that way. Or if you motion to approve as recommended by staff, it's whatever you want to do.
I'll start that. I'll recommend that we approve it as what recommended by staff and as it is that with those two changes included. So we
I'll
can-
second that.
Only if I can do a friendly amendment to that.
Absolutely.
And just authorize staff to fill in the blanks that you see on the first page with recording information and make it conditioned on mayor and city council approving
Mhm.
as well.
Okay, I agree with that.
Like, it would get too messy if we had something in there due to supply chain issues. That would kind of,
I'm thinking, that,
I mean,
they might have to
it's
be
pretty
coming back to
reasonable
us
right
every other month asking for extensions or something or other. So,
Yeah, right. So the extension is open-ended because you don't want to limit, if you don't anticipate what those would be. And again, the idea is you have the right to say no. You have discretion in terms of the extensions.
I'll accept your amendment.
So let me just throw this out there, because I'm pretty much in agreement as well. But let's say that there's, this was pre-fire suppression. And now this thing gets elongated, now it's post-fire suppression needed. Is that something that would change this agreement in some way?
So what this would pertain to is the improvement plan. So the specs, the size of the pipes, the material used that have been reviewed and that have been approved, and then that's what they are building to. That's what we're talking about here, the actual infrastructure. The other regulations in terms of whether somebody has to comply with other fire suppression or city ordinances, that's not impacted by this. This is purely we, the BPW, have presented you our construction plans and go ahead and build those construction plans. But if you don't build within or complete that within 1 year, we can come back and say, we want to change this, or let's take a look at this, and you can alter. It's the period within which you get that re-review of the infrastructure specs.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but I mean, when the city approves, they approve based upon a code date, a city code date, and it's very, very unusual to get an amendment to the code that's retroactive.
But this would be beyond that year, would be into that second year. That's the reason I asked the question.
Correct.
Is that differentiated?
It doesn't, again, we're just talking about the BPW.
I understand.
improvement plans.
I was running into my.
Yeah, because the city issues the building permits, and that's their code.
That's right. And this section 2.2 is under the BPW improvement. So that is not the city. The city section 3.
If they weren't sitting here, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
But is this now going to be the form that is memorialized for developer agreements at the current time? Or is this only for this particular development?
Correct. So the form has not been changed. I do want to update the form to include these policies. And when we do that, I'll bring that back to the board. But the form still says 1 year.
It'd be similar to like when we do a pole attachment agreement, you have a form pole attachment agreement. You may have Comcast, Verizon, whoever it may be, come to you and say, I'm okay with this, but I'd like this. And they're going to put that in front of us, right? In front of the board for a decision. Similar.
Right. And our charge as staff, and I think Nick can support this, is we stick to the form as close as possible to avoid these conversations. But in instances where it's an important item that the developer asks us to take to the board, that's where we're bringing these. And these are the two items that were important to the developer.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And next, we have Donovan Smith resolution. And so this is the one that was before us. This is to memorialize what was before us last month, I think.
This context, these two per policy, these two resolutions come before the board. They've already been before city council. They got the blessing at the last city council meeting. This goes back to a policy as if we borrow money, we have to have approval from both us and the blessing of city council. So this is just per policy, bringing it before you. Once executed by city has already allowed it or already approved it. We would approve it, have them signed. We would then go to closing and we would utilize the help of Scott Matthews within Mike's firm. And we would set up closing with DHSS and DNREC probably in the near future. And then that keeps on the process moving.
Just want to be a little bit more nuanced about that, because I think it's important. So the charter, it's a charter requirement that when the board borrows money and pledges revenues to support that borrowing. So out of an abundance of caution, these resolutions are being presented to the board for this consideration. Again, it's a narrow provision in the charter for revenue bonds, basically. And so if it's not a revenue bond, you're kind of outside of that a little bit, but out of an abundance of caution, with considering that whenever the board goes to state for loans, it's typically revenue bonds over an extended period of time. This one's different because this is meant to be forgiven after the work's completed. So that's the nuance. But out of abundance of caution, the recommendation is we proceed with the resolution just as we normally would. And well, the board has to approve it anyway, but the city council approval was out of an abundance of caution. But this has been reviewed by bond counsel. It is the necessary step in order to close on the loans. The loans are necessary in order to go forward with the Donovan Smith project. So unless there are questions, our recommendation is as presented.
So just to clarify, Mike, so things like non-revenue bonds, lines of credit, things like that do not fall underneath that clause of the charter. Is that correct?
I'll simply in this context, I'll let the charter speak for itself. And then I'd be happy to discuss in greater detail, but bear with me here. It is.
So you have to read it as it was written in 1906.
It says,
Old.
yes, old. Says the board shall have the authority to borrow money and issue bonds or certificates of indebtedness and to secure the payment thereof by pledging the revenues derived from the operation of any project for which bonds are issued pursuant to this section. The board shall obtain the prior consent of the mayor and city council for such borrowing. That's what it says.
So we should approve, we would approve it now, and then the city council.
We already did.
Oh, they already did. Okay.
And there are two resolutions, so we would need to consider each one individually because they are resolutions. The standard process of first read either in toto or by title only, then you vote.
I can make a motion by title only and to approve both of these.
You have to take them one by one.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
approve. What number are you calling it?
You can go off what
Or do we need a number?
We should, because it's the,
This one is, here you go, Tom.
The first one is let's say 500 feet, 8-inch PVC.
yep, I have you. So which number is it? 6? And then the other one's 7. Okay, yep.
2206.
Okay, so the motion would be to read resolution 22-006 by title
By
only.
title only, yes.
You need a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. President, members of the board, resolution number 22-006, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Board of Public Works of the City of Lewes authorizing borrowing of $2,742,146 from the Delaware Water Pollution Control Revolving Fund, acting by and through the Delaware Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control for the purpose of financing the Donovan Smith Manufactured Home Park project and authorizing other necessary action. Mr. President, resolution 22-006 has been read by title only and placed before the board for its consideration.
Motion?
I made the motion to
so
approve it.
This is
Yeah, and it's
so,
second.
so moved for this.
Aye.
It's been moved by
Yep.
Press, seconded by Tom.
All, can I have a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now we need 22-007. Same process.
A motion to be read by.
I make a
name.
motion that be read by title only for resolution 22-007.
Second.
Mr. President, members of the board, resolution number 22-007, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Board of Public Works of the City of Lewes authorizing borrowing of $2,869,998 from the Delaware Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, acting by and through the Delaware Department of Health and Social Services Division of Public Health for the purpose of financing the Donovan Smith Manufactured Home Park project and authorizing other action. Necessary action. Mr. President, members of the board, resolution 22-007 has been read by title only and placed before the board for its consideration.
Motion for approval?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
That was easy.
Thank you.
When do we have shovels in the ground on this? Do you think? I ask you that every time.
So from what I can tell, and Vince and I have talked about this, I think bidding and awarding is gonna happen in September and October. And then after that, we would schedule a meeting with all residents of Donovan Smith and the surrounding area, because there's gonna be impact there. We tend to wait until the contractor is chosen or selected. That way the contractor can be there. Residents can put a face with a name. The contractor can put a face with a name. We would select an RPR, so the RPR would be there. And then after that, I think we're gonna be in the 12 to 18-month timeframe for construction. It's narrow streets. You got a lot of work that needs to be done there, but this is the next step on moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the update of the strategic plan. So this was on our agenda last month. What you should have had was an update from me relative to where I think we are and what actions need to be taken. And so this is an open discussion as to what the board would like to do going forward.
We can just accept it as it was presented last month, I assume. Yeah.
If that's acceptable.
I'm in favor of them. I don't know what.
Take that motion.
Second.
Question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And so this is going to take some action by the staff to go forward. General status and update on the mitigation committee.
Yeah,
Mr. Press.
thank you. I just wanted to report back. We had our first meeting on July 6th, I think it was. And the one thing I really wanted, it went well. I think we have a really good committee. We're still waiting for the appointment
I make that
Sit.
tomorrow.
from the city on the city's representative on it. But we have a good board, and one thing I want to get out front of everybody at the beginning, because it's key to what we're going to be doing. The first question was, what year storm are we going to design to or design for mitigation? And the board would like to use, I thought we ended up saying 2050. The minutes say 30 years. We talked 30 years, but I thought we said rounded it back to 2050 but I'm going to ask the rest of the board at the next meeting we have, which is next week. If that's the case, it doesn't make a big bunch of difference. It would be, 2052 rather than 2050. So I want to make sure that the board was aware of that and accepts that. The
I
other,
guess that gets your call
okay.
on which dates.
Well, we're gonna have to design to it, so I didn't make it designing thing or planning things without it. And then,
And I would suggest we stay with the round years because that's where all the FEMA and everyone else is. I mean, they're not forecasting by year, they're putting out by.
Right. so we'll change it if it's so, the minutes say, 30 years, but I think we said 50, I thought. And the other thing related to that is for that period, for that date, the DNREC's estimates range from 9 inches to 23 inches of rise. And of course, then there's a median somewhere between that. The committee would like to use the worst case scenario, the 23 inches. They say, things are happening quicker than they seem to be predicted. They feel if we're going to do this, we have to do it very conservatively, and they would.
Can you use both and just have different scenarios for each one, or is that too much work?
Each utility?
No, not, well, I didn't know you do more than one. I thought we just the wastewater treatment plant.
No, this isn't the wastewater treatment plant. The wastewater treatment plant's being done by, in fact, GHD is using 2050 for the wastewater treatment plant. So we're not taking that on. That's what we're paying them for. So it's everything but the treatment plant. It's all the sewers, pumping stations, it's water system, all the electric distribution, stormwater, everything.
So just, so everyone knows, the 3 curves that come down from up high are, the lower one is the 25% confidence. The middle curve is the 50% confidence interval, and the upper curve is the 75% confidence. So,
In confidence that it will happen?
yes.
Okay,
And at this point in time, as Press said, every update that they have ever issued has risen all 3 curves above what the forecast was the prior period, which is like usually done every 3 years. So, it's only going up. And I will tell you, talking with many other cities across the nation, most people are opting either for the 75-year probability, or alternatively going to the 500-year storm event rather than the 100-year. And they actually happen to be kind of corresponding, but the 100-year storm is a better defined topographical than the 500-year. So,
but here we're looking at a 50-year.
Really,
I mean, 30,
30
I'm 19,
30 years out.
30 years,
Yeah.
yeah, 50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but whether, with Preston's asking whether we use the 50% confidence, which is the mid-level curve,
Mhm.
or the 75% confidence, which is the upper curve.
Okay,
It's
Yeah.
basically unanimous that everyone would like to use the most conservative, looking at what we're seeing happen.
And,
So,
and just the backup to that is that most municipalities are using the upper curves or increased freeboard or something for critical infrastructure like utilities. And then potentially using a lesser one for residential. Because critical versus non,
so we have, if you're okay with that, I'll continue at that, with that.
Mhm.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Does this committee have a specific charge?
Well,
that
the
you put out?
resolution says to provide information or feedback to the board on
Okay.
mitigation. It's very general.
But there's, I was gonna say, you're not pick like 3 categories, like nothing
No.
like that.
No,
Okay.
we're, and the next meeting is going to, Robin and Josh have put together a couple nice maps of it. We're using maps that GMB prepared for the 2016 evacuation study. Do you remember that? Okay. And that's some very good maps in there. They show you what happens. This is for a flood, of course, but that same thing with the sea level rise, of course. A 1-year rise in sea level or flood, then a 2-year in there. The 2-year is 24 inches. So that's the one that we're really looking at. And since that's 24 rather than 23 inches. And we're overlaying that on the maps that show that those aerial photo maps that GMB prepared show most of the utilities. They show each manhole, they show most of the electrical, most of the sewer and water utilities. That they're not complete, but they're really good base maps. And you can see by overlaying the 2-foot rise, which of our utility facilities are going to be impacted using those assumptions.
But we're also looking at it from like a mutual aid perspective and making sure we have our ducks in a row. We're looking at it from possibly a policy direction in which, you know, if we have flooding on the beach side, in which even the transformers would be overtaken, at what point do you cut power off? Do you cut the pump stations off? So we're trying to look at it from not only assets, but looking at it from policy, looking at it from having mutual aid set up for, you know, worst case scenario. So it kind of hits all points.
The other, you know,
And we have-
Chris,
They prepared, and I think Josh primarily worked on doing a plan without all the background noise in it, just showing the utilities on a site without the vegetation and buildings. So he's got a clean map that you can really see clearly where all the utilities are. So
you might
Yeah.
check with the state. I mean, I went to a meeting that the state put on in the high school about 5 years ago, where they were looking at different scenarios, and they had a computer model.
that's what this is.
Yeah, do you have that?
Yeah, that's basically what was created on them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I saw that.
A really high quality.
Very,
area
very
photo
definitely, yeah.
So that's what we're going to be looking at in our next meeting, where everything's are, which utilities, assets are in the danger zones, we're calling it. So that's where we're moving from right now. The next question is going to be, you know, is when there's a 2-foot sea level rise, are people still going to live in those areas? I mean, if they're having flooding once a month rather than once every 5 years or something, are they going to, that's a city thing. We're not going to get into
We had
that.
ours,
But I
they've
think-
already, we've had one resiliency committee. We have
I know.
that tomorrow,
I
so
know.
that's why I was wondering whether you had specific
We're not,
things that you're looking at, or what, how about a specific, have you targeted a date that you'd like to wrap up to come back to the board with
we're
recommendations?
just
Okay,
a second.
see how it goes.
We're not even, you know, up to speed really yet, but that's the thing we'll be looking to, you know, working with the city on, because if we're raising things several feet, I mean, like an electric panel for a pumping station, that goes up 10 feet in the air in front of somebody's house, you know, that's not going to be very attractive. And if they're flooded often, is it going to become attractive to live there anymore?
And that's something we're gonna cover tomorrow in the workshop. I think one thing to pay attention, there was basically 13 things that they brought for consideration, and they voted on 2 of them. So there's 11 or 12 things in here that were never really explored in any, you know.
As we get
field
further
depth.
down the road with what we're doing, when we have to sit with you with having your person on the council, I mean, on the committee, will help to make that happen.
Yeah, but our charter is strictly
Yeah. so it's-
utility infrastructure.
Yeah.
Not
We're not going to reinvent the wheel.
construction,
Yeah.
housing, zoning, all of that, which is in the city's bailiwick.
Is the BCP, the building or continuity plan in this as well? In other words, how to keep something up when it's, you know, if the wellhead gets knocked over, what do we do? Is that in your?
I really
bailiwick as
haven't
well?
gotten to that point, but it's a good point. That we'd have to do. I mean, you're talking about,
Business continuity. So if a water tower falls, what do we do? If
Oh.
if this happens,
Yeah.
you know, what do we
What-
do?
what-
And do we have the
what do we
equipment to do it and the expertise to do it?
that's a very good point. Yeah, that's something. After we decide what's happening, we decide how we're going to reset.
Knock on wood.
I'm sorry.
He knocked on wood.
Oh,
Oh, it's concrete. Yeah, I mean, part of, I mean, Press has got an excellent group put together. They've got a very diverse background, and it's to identify things first to figure out what's at risk, and then to figure, you know, from there to move on to figure out what we do or how to mitigate or.
and at some point, I think we should get into policies like encouraging solar, EVs, things like that, you know, try to slow down sea level rise and the impact of that. But that's step further down the road.
And the map
and the-
shows the sea level rise, so to speak, at 2050. Does that imply that that's where the sea meets the sand now? And that there's 2 feet of water from there out into the bay?
That's my understanding, but is that,
So the sea level maps that are put out by DNREC and that are all called bathtub maps. So you turn a spigot on in the Atlantic Ocean, you raise it up, and where does the contour lines fit? It doesn't take into account storms, fetch, rainfall events, or anything else. So they actually grossly underestimate. But when a coastal community, just like we made out fine in Sandy, because the storm hit 15 miles north and the winds were coming eastward, versus if you're on the north side, and it's almost impossible for any of the modeling to model my coastal effects. So they chose the bathtub models because it gives you at least a predictable feel. But
A predictable feel of the sunny day waterline? I'm trying to.
Yeah.
yeah, so-
Think of your bathtub, that gets a good
Yeah.
analogy, bro.
Okay.
I mean, so
Not that it,
It
your
would-
bathtub looks like.
So what it does, and what the bathtub model does is if you had a berm all the way around, except for a 2-foot path, the water came up, it would flood inside and out. If the berm was continuous, the inside would be dry and the outside wouldn't. So the bathtub looks at hydrostatic forces and contour lines.
you
Is
guys,
that correct?
Not my area. The
So-
model
so in
the model I
2050
saw 5 years ago, 1 foot more than what you're talking about. 2 feet of water between Bay Avenue and the city. At 4 feet 6 inches. Instead of 3 feet 5 inches, if I did the math right, there was 2 feet of water between Bay Avenue to the city, and everything on the bay side of Bay Avenue is high and dry. So
well,
we're getting
they
close.
still look like that.
Yeah, we're getting
Do you
close.
guys have any other things that we talked about? That
Richard just had a question.
No,
Go ahead, Richard.
I'm sorry, Richard.
no, that's it. Thank you.
All right, that's all I had.
Okay. That's good.
All right, call to the public. Do we have anyone? on?
But no questions.
A couple spouses on there, see the way to start different.
Yeah.
Call to the press. I don't see-
actually, fan
Okay.
and I'm not press, I'm just a citizen here speaking in front of you. Tim Ritzert, Harborview Road. I wanted to follow up on a statement that was made earlier about the, it was in Austin's report, and I believe you were describing wells that were rebuilt. I think that's what I heard. And I think you said it was wells number 3 and 5.
3 and 5 were redeveloped.
Or redeveloped, that's the word.
Yeah.
Okay. And when was that work done?
It would have been the spring of this year. So 5 was redone first and then 3 was redone second.
And was that work done based upon a perceived need, or?
We have AC Schultes that comes in and they run a test on all 5 wells every single year. And they take a look at the pump curves and they see where the pump is designed to be, or what the well is designed to be pumping versus
Right.
what it is pumping. When those design curves kind of come off kilter,
Right.
then they give a recommendation to us, and that recommendation for 3 and 5 was redevelopment. Redevelopment is essentially you clean the pipe, make sure the casing's good, and then they will come back and rebuild the pump. I mean, head to toe, rebuild the pump.
Sure. Thank you for that explanation.
I want to share an anecdotal experience that happened, and I failed to write down the date. So that was my error. But sometime during the last 30 days, and it was closer to 30 days ago, rather than just a day ago. I noticed, and neighbors in my community noticed a drop off in pressure, what we perceive to be water pressure. That would not be associated with any of this kind of work. Is there any explanation for anything that happened during the last 30 days?
The only thing that I could come up with is that if there was valves being turned on Politown Road, during that time, you may have cut off, like, for example, if you cut water
Right.
supply coming down and you were switching over, the other way of being fed on that side of town, if you shut off Politown Road, is actually being backfed from CH Mason's Way coming back from Cedar.
Right.
So other than that, from a pressure standpoint, we have all kinds of controls and notifications set up.
Right.
To my knowledge, we haven't had any issues.
And that kind of valve work that you're just describing was done during Monday through Friday, the work schedule, I can imagine, right? I
Yes.
think I was aware of that going on. So we talked at that time.
No discoloration?
No, there was no discoloration during this period. It was just a drop off in pressure. And my recollection is that it was over a weekend. And I was wondering if it was associated with just load, where there was, because of the influx of summer visitors and the demand on the system. So
I think our highest peak this year has been 2.1. So it's really from a standpoint of demand, you look at the production at the wells and also the tank level, because the tank level correlates to the pressure within the town. From a pressure standpoint, I have not been notified of anything that's been crazy or out of the normal, other than we had the slight peak, which right around July 4th, which was just under 2.1 million gallons. Consistently throughout the week, we've been anywhere from about 1.7 to 1.9. So.
and your technology at the wellhead is able to capture your demands, right?
When we had the issue with the valve closed, I could go back and read pressures that were by day, by time, by hour, by minute. So I can go back
And
years.
reconstruct all that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just to clarify, or, reemphasize what Austin just said, the pressure in town is set by the water tower, the static level. We have the capability of running off the wells if you have to take the water tower out of service, like for service. But, the cycling of pumps on and off doesn't affect the pressure in the system.
So if
Okay.
there's a huge influx of everybody turns on their faucet at one time, the pressure on the level in the tower is coming down and the pressure comes down.
And I'll use like Monday mornings corresponds with our higher demand.
Okay.
So Monday mornings irrigation comes on for
Sure.
people are using it. That's
Mhm.
when we have our highest. But we haven't noticed anything at the
Okay,
plant that told
so
us.
it's not been,
So this
Correct.
happens again, someone should call in and you can check the valve.
Document.
And I'll do a better job next time. I promise you.
I do not doubt that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other members of the public? All right, make a motion to go into executive session.
I'll make that motion.
The second,
Second.
in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very much.